parents took my sister on vacation instead of me. She got arrested and ruined it. Now they finally see who she really is. Growing up, my sister was the golden child in my parents' eyes. No matter what she did, they saw her as perfect. She could lie straight to their faces, and they'd believe every word. If she got caught sneaking out or skipping school, they'd call it a misunderstanding and let it slide. I was the opposite. I kept my grades up, worked part-time jobs, and stayed out of trouble, but it was like I was invisible. They never praised me for it. Instead, they'd nitpick my choices or compare me to her in ways that made no sense. When I was 16, I overheard them talking about how my sister had so much potential, while I was just reliable. That word stung. Reliable wasn't enough to earn their attention. The favoritism got worse as we got older. My sister started pushing boundaries more, and they kept making excuses. She'd throw tantrums to get her way, and they'd cave every time. By the time we were in our early 20s, I had moved out and was paying my own bills, while she still lived at home, jobless, spending their money. I tried pointing out how she manipulated them, but they'd shut me down. They said I was jealous or too hard on her. It wasn't jealousy. I just saw what they refused to see. When they announced the vacation, it was the final straw. They sat me down and said they were taking my sister to a resort overseas. I wasn't invited. Their excuse was that they could only afford to take one of us, and she needed a break from her stressful life. I didn't even argue. I knew what they meant. She had been partying too much, and they thought a fancy trip would fix her. They didn't care that I was working 50-hour weeks to keep my head above water. They didn't ask how I was doing. They just packed their bags and left me behind, like I didn't matter. A few days after they left, I saw my sister's post online. She was posing in a bikini by a sparkling pool, holding a cocktail, with my parents smiling in the background. The resort looked like something out of a magazine, marble floors, infinity pools, the works. My mom posted about how they were making memories. I scrolled through the photos, feeling a knot in my stomach. I wasn't upset about missing the trip itself. I was used to being left out. What hurt was how they kept choosing her, even when she gave them nothing but trouble. I closed the app and went back to work, trying to push it out of my mind. I had learned long ago that dwelling on their unfairness only made things harder. My sister's track record was a mess, and I had a front-row seat to it all. She started getting into trouble in middle school, talking back to teachers, picking fights with other kids. By high school, it escalated. She got caught shoplifting at a mall, but my parents paid off the store to keep it quiet. Another time, she was found with weed in her backpack, and they called it teenage rebellion. They never punished her. Instead, they'd sit her down, talk softly, and promise her things would get better. I was the one who had to deal with the fallout. When she trashed the house after a party, I cleaned it up before they got home. When she borrowed my car and crashed it, I paid for the repairs. They never thanked me. They just acted like it was my job to fix her mistakes. As she got older, her behavior didn't improve. She dropped out of college after one semester, claiming it was too hard. She bounced between part-time jobs, quitting whenever she got bored. My parents kept giving her money, saying she was finding herself. Meanwhile, I was working overtime at a call center, saving every penny to afford my apartment. I tried talking to them about her once, maybe 2 years before the vacation. I told them she was hanging out with a rough crowd, people I knew were into petty theft and selling fake IDs. They didn't take it seriously. My mom said I was exaggerating, and my dad told me to focus on my own life. I stopped trying after that. It was clear they'd never listen. The worst part was how she treated me. She'd borrow money and never pay it back. She'd lie about me to our parents, saying I was mean to her, which got me lectures about being supportive. I kept my distance, but it was hard to cut her off completely when my parents kept dragging me back into her drama. I knew she was heading for something worse than shoplifting or parties. I just didn't expect it to happen on their dream vacation. The vacation was supposed to be their big escape. My parents had been planning it for months, talking about white sand beaches and turquoise water. They booked a 5-star resort in a coastal city abroad, the kind of place with private cabanas and personal butlers. My sister was thrilled, posting about it nonstop before they left. I wasn't invited, and they didn't even pretend to feel bad about it. They said it was a special trip for the 3 of them, like I wasn't part of the family. I didn't bother responding. I just nodded and went back to my life, working long shifts and crashing on my second-hand couch. A few days into their trip, I got a text from my mom. It was short. "Please answer your phone." I ignored it, assuming she wanted to brag about the resort, or asked me to check on the house. Then the voicemails started piling up. My dad left one, his voice tense, saying they needed to talk urgently. I finally listened to it after the third one. He said my sister had been arrested. A hotel staff member caught her trying to steal wallets from lockers near the spa. She wasn't just grabbing one or two, she had a handful when they stopped her. The staff called the police, and now she was in custody. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, feeling a mix of frustration and vindication. I wasn't shocked. This was exactly the kind of thing I'd warned them about. My sister had been stealing for years, but she always got away with it because my parents smoothed things over. This time, she picked the wrong place. The resort wasn't some small-town store willing to let it go for a bribe. They had security cameras, and the local police didn't care about her sob story. I didn't call my parents back right away. I needed a moment to process it. Part of me wanted to let them sweat it out, to deal with the consequences of ignoring me all those years. Plain. The arrest wasn't just a one-off mistake. My sister had been reckless from the start of the trip. She didn't just steal wallets that one time at the spa, she'd been slipping into restricted areas of the resort for days, taking small items like sunglasses, keycards, and cash from unattended bags. The hotel staff had been watching her, suspicious of her late-night wanderings. When they finally caught her red-handed in the locker room, it was because they'd set up extra security to trap her. The wallets weren't the worst of it. Security footage showed her passing stolen goods to a guy she'd been seen with around the resort, someone the staff recognized as a local known for scamming tourists. My parents were blindsided. They thought she was just acting out, maybe pulling a prank. But the police report painted a different picture. She'd met this guy online before the trip, and they planned to target the resort together. She was the distraction, flirting with guests, keeping them busy, while he and his crew lifted valuables. The police had her on camera laughing as she handed over a stolen credit card. This wasn't her first time either. The guy admitted to the cops that she'd helped with smaller thefts earlier in the week, though he tried to pin most of the blame on her. The local authorities didn't care about their excuses. They charged her with theft and conspiracy, and because it was an international case, the process was strict. My parents called me again, leaving voicemails that grew more desperate. They were stuck at the police station, trying to understand the charges through a translator. The resort had kicked them out, unwilling to let them stay after the scandal. They were now in a cramped motel near the station, with no idea how to navigate the legal system. My mom's texts started coming in late at night, saying they didn't know what to do and asking for advice. I didn't respond. I was still processing the fact that they'd taken her on this trip, knowing her history, and now expected me to fix it. I went to bed and let their messages pile up, feeling a strange calm. This was their mess, not mine. Plain. The vacation collapsed into a logistical nightmare. My parents spent their days shuttling between the police station, the embassy, and a local lawyer's office. The legal fees started piling up immediately, eating through their vacation budget, and then some. They had to wire money from their savings back home to cover it. The embassy wasn't much help. Since my sister wasn't a minor and the charges were serious, they could only provide a list of attorneys and basic advice. The lawyer they hired warned them that the case could drag on for weeks, maybe months, because the local courts were slow and didn't prioritize tourists. My sister was still in a holding cell, allowed one short call a day, which she used to beg my parents to get her out. The motel they were staying in was a far cry from the resort. It had stained carpets, a broken air conditioner, and thin walls that let them hear every argument from neighboring rooms. They couldn't afford anything better after paying the lawyer's retainer and settling the resort's damages for the stolen items. My mom's texts to me grew more frantic, describing how they were eating cheap takeout and barely sleeping. She said my dad was pacing all night, stressed about the money and the possibility of my sister facing jail time. They still didn't fully grasp how deep her involvement was. They kept hoping it was a misunderstanding, that the guy she was with had pressured her into it. Meanwhile, the resort had shared the security footage with the police, and it was damning. It showed my sister not just stealing but planning with the guy, pointing out targets in the lobby, and slipping stolen cards into her purse. The police found texts on her phone coordinating with him, going back weeks before the trip. She wasn't just a bystander, she was an active participant. The local news picked up the story, not naming her directly but describing a foreign tourist caught in a theft ring. My parents were mortified, worried it would follow them home. They stopped posting online, and my sister's social media went silent. I got a call from my dad one night, his voice hoarse. He didn't ask me to fix anything, just rambled about how they didn't see this coming. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. I wasn't ready to step in. For years, I'd been the one cleaning up her messes, and they'd brush me off every time I warned them. Now they were stuck thousands of miles from home, with no easy way out. I hung up and went back to my routine, focusing on work and my own life. Their texts kept coming, but I left them unanswered. They needed to face this without me. When my parents finally returned home, they were shadows of themselves. The trip had drained them financially and emotionally. They'd spent over $15,000 on legal fees, travel costs, and settling with the resort, wiping out their savings. My sister was released on bail but faced a court date in 3 months, with the possibility of a short prison sentence if convicted. They had to hire another lawyer back home to coordinate with the international case, adding more expenses. The house felt heavy when I visited. No one spoke much. My parents barely looked at each other, and my sister stayed in her room, avoiding everyone. For the first time, they didn't rush to her defense. There were no excuses about her being misled or it being a one-time mistake. My mom sat at the kitchen table, staring at her coffee, while my dad shuffled through legal documents. They'd seen the security footage, read the police reports, and heard the lawyer's blunt assessment. My sister wasn't just caught up in something, she'd planned it, lied to their faces, and dragged them into a mess they couldn't ignore. They were forced to confront the truth I'd been pointing out for years. I didn't feel triumphant. I was exhausted. Their silence wasn't an apology, it was defeat. They'd spent so long believing in her, pouring everything into her, that this broke something in them. My mom tried to talk to me once, saying they'd been wrong about a lot of things. I nodded but didn't say much. I wasn't ready to let them off the hook. They'd made their choices, and I'd been the one paying for it my whole life. The house visit was short. I left without promising to come back soon. The legal process kept grinding forward. My sister's case was complicated because it involved international law, and the prosecution wasn't budging. The lawyer warned that a plea deal might be the best option, but it would still come with a fine and a permanent record. My parents were now looking at selling their car to cover the next round of costs. Their dream vacation had turned into a financial disaster, and their relationship with my sister was fractured. They were starting to see her for who she was, but it came at a cost they hadn't expected. After the trip, my parents started reaching out to me more. They called to ask about my job, my apartment, even small things like what I'd been eating. It was awkward, like they were trying to rebuild something they'd ignored for years. My dad sent a long text one night, apologizing for not listening when I warned them about my sister. He said they'd been blind, caught up in wanting to believe she was better than she was. My mom followed up with a call, her voice shaky, saying they wanted to make things right. I listened but kept my responses short. I wasn't angry anymore, just detached. Their apologies felt like too little, too late. I told them the truth, they'd chosen her over me every time, even when I was the one holding things together. I reminded them of the times I'd cleaned up her messes, paid for her mistakes, and got nothing but criticism in return. I said I'd moved on, built my own life without their support, and didn't need their sudden attention. It wasn't the warm reconciliation they might have hoped for. I wasn't cruel, but I was honest. They needed to understand the weight of their decisions. My sister's case didn't improve. The lawyer negotiated a plea deal, 6 months of probation, a hefty fine, and a ban from returning to the country where the arrest happened. She was lucky to avoid jail, but the consequences followed her. She couldn't find work because of the pending charges on her record, and my parents stopped giving her money. She moved out to live with a friend, but I heard she was struggling to pay rent. I didn't reach out. I'd spent too long being her safety net. My parents' dynamic shifted too. They were more cautious, less willing to jump to conclusions about people. They started checking in with me regularly, not just when they needed something. I didn't fully trust it, but I let them keep trying. They were grappling with the reality of who my sister was, and it forced them to rethink how they treated me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I focused on my own life, work, friends, saving for a better place. Their world had crumbled, but mine was still standing.